Good afternoon and happy new year, Houdat Nation. Brendan Boylan here with Bob Rose. It is the Saints News Network pregame show, and I missed all of you guys a week ago. Bob may have a different feeling, but hopefully it's mutual. We missed each other. But Bob, listen, we have a lot going on. Obviously, last week, a forgettable one for the New Orleans Saints for a multitude of reasons, and I feel like a broken record. You and I have said it week in and week out, must win, must win, must win. But we finally hit the point where, statistically speaking, it actually is a must win this week against the Carolina Panthers. But before we jump into all that, Happy New Year, Bob. I hope you and Lauren and Will had an enjoyable New Year's Eve. Did he stay up till midnight? That's the big question. The little guy do it?
Yeah, and Happy New Year to you and your family, Brendan, and to all you Whodats tuning in with us this afternoon. I hope you had a great New Year, and I hope your 2022 is highly prosperous. Will did stay up till midnight. My 16-year-old daughter, Isabella, did not. She called it a night about 10 minutes before midnight, and I don't think she even realized what time it was. So that was comical. But listen, if 2021 can take out Betty White on its way out the door, then I didn't want to mess with it anymore. I was ready to wave the white flag and move on to the next year.
Yeah, the last 2 years have been very difficult for multitudes of people, and it's been really difficult, at least 2021 for the New Orleans Saints. Set a new NFL record, 57 different starters for the Saints. Now, a lot of that had to do with the COVID protocols and what happened last week. But let's put that in the rear view mirror. Let's look ahead towards this week. They get an NFC South opponent in Carolina, and both these teams were, I would say, completely different when they met all the way back in week number 2. Remember, the Saints had 8 coaches in the COVID protocols that week. It was Ian Book who was in charge of substitutions, and to come full circle, Ian Book starts because of COVID just last week. But Taysom Hill back in the mix along with a handful of Saints, and now a handful of Panthers that were not expected to give it a go. But remember, the COVID protocols did change from 10 days to 5. Bob, do you mind catching everybody up on what's been going on over the last 24 hours?
Brendan, I'll do the best I can, but I don't know what the hell is going on in the last 24 hours. Not only personally, but professionally as far as the Saints go. We thought that Eric McCoy and Marcus Williams would be available to play this afternoon after they were activated off the reserve COVID list yesterday. Then we came to find out that if it's within 24 hours that from the time that a player has been activated off COVID list, that they may not be cleared for game time. And then we found out about 2 hours ago, I think, that McCoy and Williams are indeed out for today's game, listed on the injury report as illness. Now, my question is, was it player decision because they still don't feel well? If so, I certainly respect that. Was it team decision, for player safety and the safety of those that they come in contact with? If so, I definitely respect that. Or was it league decision? And I'd rather not go any further than that, other than to say throughout the league, there were several other players that I saw that were activated from reserve COVID within the last 24 to 48 hours. All of them, to my knowledge, are cleared to play today, including defensive end Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers and leading tackler of the Panthers, linebacker Shaq Thompson. They were cleared within hours of previous hours to McCoy and Williams, yet they're cleared to play. I'm not throwing out there a definite conspiracy, but like I said, I have valid questions as should anybody be have them involved with the situation. But we know, to my knowledge, we know no more than what I just said. All we do know is that on the field, the Saints will be without Eric McCoy. And oh, by the way, Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk again against Brian Burns and Shaq Thompson and that Carolina defense, which absolutely pummeled Jameis Winston back in week 2.
Well, as I mentioned, both those teams completely different. Listen, the Panthers still had J.C. Horn, Hassan Reddick, a big piece of the Panthers puzzle, is going to miss as well. And the Panthers' offensive line's banged up. They're going to be starting their third center. Their left tackle doubtful. So New Orleans certainly has an opportunity to not just get a win, but put themselves in a prime position to enter the final week of the season with a win and in situation. Now, obviously, there's some other factors that would have to come into play, but as I said on my podcast, some that I don't think it's a big ask. I think that it's certainly possible to win and some help that the Saints could go into the final week of the season with an opportunity to find themselves in a win and in type of deal. Let's talk about these Carolina Panthers. Aside from the COVID and guys coming back, let's talk about the mess that is the Carolina Panthers. They're right in my backyard. You hear about it almost every day on the news. And this is a team without an identity, without a true starting quarterback, as there's little controversy to who's going to start, who's going to play. Both Newton and Sam Darnold are expected to play this week. They're without Christian McCaffrey, and I like to use the comparison with McCaffrey and Michael Thomas, both superstars, but haven't seen a whole lot of the field over the last 2 years because of some injuries. Yes, the Panthers still have some threats at wide receiver. Robbie Anderson, who was one of the most underrated signings of 2 summers ago now. And then you have another guy in DJ Moore who he's a speedster, and he could do a little bit of everything. You've seen him line up in a couple different roles for the Panthers over the years as well. But I mentioned the concerns to that offensive line. We mentioned that the defense is going to be rolling out some guys this week that didn't practice all week. What do you expect out of this Carolina Panther team? And is Matt Rule really on the hot seat, in your opinion?
I'll start with that. I think Matt Rule is on the hot seat, mainly because of the way he's handled the quarterback position, and the fact that offense of the Panthers has gone in reverse and absolutely disintegrated after what was a very promising start for them. So I think Rule is on the hot seat. I'll be very interested to see what happens at both head coach and quarterback for that franchise this offseason. But as you said, the Panthers will start Sam Darnold today. I expect to see Cam Newton in a little bit also, probably in some short yardage situations to take advantage of Cam's legs and physicality. But Darnold lit up this Saints defense in week 2, one of the best games he's had, and an otherwise putrid career, in my opinion. But the Saints could not stop Darnold and that receiving core back in week 2. Sam threw for over 300 yards. He actually had three 300-yard outings in the first 4 games. But since then, like I said, Darnold and that entire offense has deteriorated. Panthers quarterbacks have been sacked 43 times this season. They've thrown collectively 12 touchdowns against 19 interceptions. Both those numbers are next to last in the league. And their passing production yardage-wise is ranked 29th. You don't get much worse than those numbers. Obviously we know, because the Saints passing game themselves is hovering around those marks. And it's a shame. Yeah, losing Christian McCaffrey was a killer for this offense. But DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson both deserve a heck of a lot better than what they're getting at quarterback. DJ Moore especially, he's one of my favorite receivers in the NFL. And he's had another terrific year. He's had 83 catches for almost 1,100 yards. But Anderson's play and productivity have suffered the most from the poor quarterback play. And Carolina certainly has some weapons at the skill position. You mentioned McCaffrey being out, which hurts. But rookie running back Chuba Hubbard, he might not be a featured back, but he's the kind of guy that you can have step in and hurt defenses. With his running ability between the tackles, receiving ability out of the backfield. So the Panthers have the weapons to hurt the Saints defense. But the book on Darnold is, if you pressure him, he will. Not a question of if, he will make plenty of backbreaking mistakes for that Carolina team. So that's going to be the key, to beating Carolina's offense today, is just pressure Sam Darnold nonstop throughout the game.
And I think it's interesting. Obviously, you mentioned Matt Rule and his handling of the quarterback position for the Carolina Panthers. I would actually say, with how poor that offense has been, facing Marcus Davenport, Cameron Jordan, David Onyemata, one of the strongest defensive lines rather in the NFC South, I would imagine Cam Newton would almost be a better matchup for the Panthers against the Saints because of his mobility, because of his strength, what he can do with his legs, and his familiarity with taking on the Saints year in and year out over the course of his NFL career. So I think it's really interesting that it's going to be Sam Darnold. I also think that plays in the hands of the New Orleans Saints pass rush, because Darnold's not really a threat to get outside the pocket, and take off or extend plays the same way that Cam Newton has over his career. I'm glad you brought up Hubbard, a guy that actually found his way to the Panthers in an interesting way. Matt Rule coached against him in college, and on draft night, his wife was there with Matt Rule and made a comment when Hubbard was still on the board. Hey, this guy tore you up in college. Are you going to get him? And that little nudge, I think, was enough, or reportedly was enough for Rule to make the phone call and grab Hubbard, I believe, in round 4 of the draft. And he's going to be starting for the Panthers today. Let's flip it and talk about this Panthers defense. I think going into the season, there was a lot of promise for this defensive backfield. Obviously, drafting J.C. Horn, Dante Jackson, one of the better young corners, and certainly has shown it at points in his career and has had certainly plenty of down moments in his career as well. Then they go and get a guy like Stephon Gilmore to try to fill that gap, especially with J.C. Horn's injury. But they haven't been super great as well. And you would mention the New Orleans Saints passing offense has not been very good. Listen, it's the first time since the Mike Ditka error, to quote you, Bob Rose, that the Saints have started 4 quarterbacks in a single season. The last time was the Billy Joes, Kerry Collins, and Jake Delhomme. And you throw those names out there, and you can imagine that the Saints were not very good that season. But nonetheless, the Saints' passing offense is certainly hurt. They get a big boost back this week with Deontay Harris. No Mark Ingram, so probably not going to see Kamara splitting out like a lot of Saints fans are used to. What do you expect out of this Saints offense, and how can they stop that vicious pass rush with a guy like Brian Burns, who is now active?
Well, yeah, like we said, since 4 of the 5 normal starters, for the Saints offensive line is out, and the only one that is in is Cesar Ruiz, the 316-pound turnstile for opposing pass rushers. I don't want to see Taysom Hill or any Saints quarterback, for that matter, get killed. So when they do pass, they need to get the ball out of their hands quickly. We saw Marquez Callaway have some success with slant patterns, in recent weeks, and nothing gets the ball out of a quarterback's hands quicker than a slant. So look for Callaway to do some of that. Deontay Harris, as quick as he is off the line of scrimmage, he could present a fast target too. And even though we probably won't see Kamara split out wide very often, like you mentioned, Brendan, Kamara can still run those wheel routes and quick check down options out of the backfield for hot reads. So when the Saints pass, that's what they're going to need to do to stave off that Carolina pass rush, who again absolutely obliterated Jameis Winston in week 2, and that was with a nearly full offensive line. Eric McCoy was out that week, but they had everybody else. The Saints did at the time. New Orleans needs to run the ball. It's as simple as that. The Panthers ranked 21st against the run, and over the last 7 or 8 weeks, their average per carry that Carolina gives up and average production per game rushing the football is up there or down there with among the worst teams in the National Football League. So even without Ingram, you need to see Tony Jones have at least some success between tackles. Taysom Hill, as we say almost every week, Taysom Hill is going to be a bigger weapon with his legs than his arm. As long as he does make some accurate throws when he is asked to throw the football, you need Taysom Hill to make more plays with his legs. And then, of course, you have the great equalizer, the human cheat code, Alvin Kamara. They just, the Saints offensive line needs to do something for Kamara to open up some rushing lanes and some option, not RPO, but cutback lanes for 41 to get to the second level of that Panthers defense. The Saints need to run the ball or they won't win today.
Well, it's going to be another slugfest, kind of ugly victory, and that's going to be the recipe for success for the Saints, not only in this matchup, but moving forward, whether the last game of the season is in Atlanta or whether they're able to find themselves in the NFC playoffs. The only way New Orleans is going to win games is win ugly. We said it a couple weeks ago in our pregame show prior to the matchup with the New York Jets. We said there was no way that the Saints would score 30 points. Now, in that game, they did, but it's also the New York Jets.
Right.
You're not going to see a lot of games where New Orleans gets, 25-plus points strictly from the offense. Now, they might get some help from the defense. I think the defense is due for a touchdown at some point. But nonetheless, the Saints offense has certainly struggled. I'm glad you brought up Alvin Kamara, though, because I wrote it in my takeaways piece from the loss against Miami. Alvin Kamara has really struggled the last 2 weeks, and you haven't seen him get nearly as many touches. I said maybe there's more to that MCL injury than we thought, and I suggested that. But it could also just be the way that these games have played out. They haven't been able to get the ball to Kamara because that's the only guy who's being targeted by the defense. How do you observe that, and how do you think the Saints fix Kamara's struggles from the last 2 weeks?
Well, first of all, I have no doubt that you're right. The Kamara's knee injury, which caused him to miss 4 games, it has to be more serious than either the team or Alvin himself are letting on. The knee injuries just don't magically heal. You need extended time, especially when it's ligament related. And take it from one who's had a number of knee injuries or ligament injuries. It takes more than a month to even get yourself up to 80%. So while I have no doubt that that's affecting Kamara, the Saints have also struggled to get Alvin in space all year long, even before his injury. Now, if I was the coach, if I was Sean Payton or Pete Carmichael, my strategy to combat what defenses are bringing and just stacking the box against Kamara would be line him up wide, especially when Ingram won't be there today, but especially when you have Mark Ingram, a bona fide rushing threat out of the backfield. I want 41 in space, so I bring him out on wheel routes. I use him out of the slot. I even line him out wide. And it's been very frustrating to me that we haven't seen Sean Payton do that. And I do wonder why. Nobody in the local media, that cover the team, even our own John Hendricks, love you, John. But I haven't heard anybody ask Coach that very question. So I am curious about that. You need to get the ball in the hands of your best weapon. That's football 101, all the way back to junior high and peewee strategy. The coaches run. So you need to do what you need to do to get Kamara involved. And I got news for you. At least from what I've seen as an observer, the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think the frustration is visibly showing with Kamara too. I counted 2 easily dropped passes last week. The ball wasn't on target. Ian Book was hurried. Imagine that. And the ball was kind of low and outside. But we've seen Kamara make a lot tougher catches than that. And I question the effort that Alvin made on those particular receptions, especially on one. Like I said, it was low, but catchable. And he had easily 10 to 12 yards of completely open space around him. I think that was in the early fourth quarter of that Dolphins loss. But it's that kind of frustration that I'm seeing from Alvin Kamara. And maybe it's the injury, maybe it's the usage, maybe it's he hasn't been able to get on track for all those reasons that we just mentioned. So it's certainly a combination of what I call an imperfect storm at this point of the year.
Well, it is an imperfect storm. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. The Saints' offensive line has been completely banged up. We talked about that. Our friend Scooby puts out there the offensive line has been putrid, makes our offense subpar. I'm completely in agreement with that. But in the defense of the guys that have played, you don't get a whole lot of times or opportunities in your life to say they literally signed someone off the street.
Yeah.
And the Saints were literally doing that. They were signing guys to the practice squad and then elevating them immediately. It was a tough situation to see last week. Obviously, there's still some starters out this week against the Carolina Panthers. But you're going to see a little bit more of those familiar names and familiar faces on the offensive line. Not so many, did they just hand this guy a jersey or were they picking guys out of the Superdome crowd? Because that's how it seemed. This year as a whole, between Hurricane Ida, between the injuries, between COVID, I mean, it has been the oddest season for fans to watch, one of the oddest seasons, and I think it would be safe to say the oddest season you and I have covered in our careers in the time we've been with this team and covering this team. And I'm with you. Alvin, you look at the situation that happened with Christian Wilkins, and was it silly with Wilkins grabbing his towel and whatnot? Yes, but have you ever really seen Alvin Kamara lose his cool to that extent? Because I haven't. And at some point, you forget that these guys are humans and all the adversities that they've faced this year eventually pile up and people get frustrated. Now, here's a perfect opportunity for the Saints to release that frustration against a familiar foe and prove, hey, even with everything that's happened, we're still a good enough football team to make the playoffs. Now, here's the crazy thing. If the Saints win out, they'll finish, 9-8? Mm-hmm. In our preseason predictions, I had the Saints at 10 or 11 wins with a healthy squad. So if the Saints remain healthy throughout the year, imagine how good this team would be. My favorite tweet of the week, and I'm sorry I don't have the credits to give it to, but someone tweeted out, imagine if Drew Brees had this defense for 15 years, the Saints would have won 15 Super Bowls. A little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm with them, because could you imagine how good the Saints would have been if the defense has played this well? And you have to tip your hat to the defense, because going and looking at last week, they were without Demario Davis. They were without Malcolm Jenkins. They were without some key pieces, and they still only surrendered 13 points. So how do they take that recipe that they found against Brady, against the Dolphins, against a multitude of teams this year, and implement that on a Panthers team who's really struggling to find an identity?
It's key. And in that case, the Saints defense just needs to continue to ride their wave of momentum that they have. They have the personnel advantage up front against Carolina. And remember, we talked about how poorly the Saints offense played in week 2 against the Panthers. The Saints defense played very poorly too, not just against Sam Darnold, but they were pushed around in the running game. I think Cam Jordan, David Onyemata, Marcus Davenport, neither Onyemata or Davenport played in that week 2 contest. But I think those kind of guys, Quan, who didn't play in week 2, Demario, those are strong character guys. They know that the onus and responsibility to get to the playoffs lies on their shoulders as a unit, and therefore their shoulders as individual players. And I think they take that responsibility very seriously. They know that they're a much superior unit as a defense over Carolina's offense, and like we saw with the Dome Patrol units of Jim Mora's teams way back when, it wore on the defense a little bit, emotionally and physically as their seasons went along. But more often than not, they were still up to the task. I think I compared this defense to those defenses. I think they're that darn good. As long as they don't give up, the Saints don't give up any sustained drives to Carolina, I think they'll eliminate the big play. Which killed them in week 2 against the Panthers. And I believe that the Saints defense can make the plays necessary to win this game. And we are down to 1 week at a time now.
Well, running out of time here for the Saints News Network pregame show. Bob, give me your X factor and your predictions for today's game.
My X factor is the man who's coming off a 3-game suspension, Deontay Harris on offense. Yes, we need someone to other than Alvin Kamara to make a play on that offensive side. I do look for Taysom Hill to run the ball more than he throws, but when he throws, Callaway and Harris have to make the plays to keep the chains moving. So I look for Callaway or Harris to have a couple big catches in this game. Defensively, like we saw Cam Jordan come back with ferocity when he missed a game with COVID. Demario Davis is coming off a game missed with by COVID as well. And I can see Davis and that linebacking core all over the field, making Sam Darnold life miserable. And I think the Saints defense is going to have one heck of a game today.
For myself, I'm going to pick an X factor, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm picking 5 instead of 1, but that 5 is the offensive line. The offensive line is going to have to come up big, whether it's in the run, whether it's in the pass. Can they keep Taysom off of his back? And can they create some holes for whether it's Taysom, Jones, or Kamara? Because we said earlier, the recipe for success for the Saints is to win games ugly, some old school football, smash mouth, run the ball down the throats of a defense, and hope your defense does enough. In terms of my score prediction, I'm going to go bold, and I'm going to say the Saints 21-6. I think the defense does enough, more than enough, to keep the Saints in the ball game, and the Saints offense capitalized once or twice, and the defense comes away with that touchdown that they're due, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Bob, your prediction?
I'm going to go the Saints win this one 19-9. Play those lottery numbers, folks. The Saints-Panthers rivalry has been extremely weird over the years, especially over the last 15 to 20 seasons. And I expect this game, like you said, to be an old school slugfest. But that's the thing with this rivalry. An offensive player on one side or the other always makes one big deep play down the field, and defensive touchdowns have not been scarce in this rivalry either. So I expect both. I expect a big offensive passing play at some point, but I expect a team, probably the Saints, since I'm picking them to win, to also get into the end zone defensive.
Bob, how can everyone follow you on the World Wide Web?
Folks, thank you again for tuning in with Brendan and I for our pregame show. Make sure you join us again at halftime. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of a grin on our face. But you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose. We're over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. And you can follow all of us and all of our works at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or go to the SI.com team page where we cover all the New Orleans Saints coverage.
And for myself, you can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at BT Boylan. You can follow my Saints work and all my other endeavors. Like Bob said, you can follow us over the Saints News Network. Just type in saints.media. John Hendricks at the stadium reporting live for us. And just shameless plug real quick, Bob. Just wanted to say thank you to you, John, and Kyle for a great 2021. I know the season's not quite over, but it's been a lot of fun working with you guys. It's been a lot of fun seeing familiar faces week in and week out with the pregame show. Hope to see you guys over at halftime, and who dat?